Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Race, Equity, and Policy series discussion on pathways to careers in emerging technologies. This series will feature a dialogue with professionals of color in the fields of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and cybersecurity. Our panelists will discuss their pathways to these growing fields, how they've navigated as a person of color, and how students can break into this industry. My name is Jackney Joseph, Director of External Affairs at the Boston Debate League, and I am joined by my co-moderator and BDL alum, Alde Jimenez, and our chat moderator, Kelly Cody. The Boston Debate League creates inclusive learning communities centering the experiences and assets of Black and other marginalized young people in Boston. And we envision a future where all young people are engaged in critical discourse, informed by evidence, and empowered to lead, shifting the narrative about who young people are and what they can achieve. The BDL serves over 700 students a year in our after-school debate program, and we provide professional development to teachers to help them integrate debate into their classrooms through our Debate-Inspired Classrooms program. We seek to transform the classroom into a place where students are not just critical thinkers, but become agents of their own learning and are empowered to use their voice and make change. We are thrilled to partner tonight with State Street in this work, and we want to thank them for sponsoring tonight's discussion. Before we get started, we'd like to welcome our esteemed guests. Elbert Hardeman, Assistant Vice President of Technology and Security at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland and a BDL board member. Cameron Mine, Robotics Software Development Engineer and Amazon Web Services.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
And President of Amazon's Boston Black Employee Network.
We also are receiving Ursua, Senior Research Associate Analytical, Senior Research Associate Analytical Development of Moderna.
So welcome to tonight's conversation on emerging technologies, AI, biotechnology, and cybersecurity. We'll talk with our panelists about their career paths, how they've navigated, and what students can do to learn about and break into these industries. We've had many advances in technology that have transformed the way we live, work, learn, and interact with each other. In just the last few months, there have been major technological advances in AI. I'm sure many of you have heard a lot about ChatGPT recently. Microsoft and Google have now released their own AI-driven chat and search tools. And these have and will continue to change how people work, from coding to copywriting to information gathering. While we've seen the beneficial impact of technological innovations, we've also seen increases in more destructive uses of technology, like cybersecurity breaches impacting our private data, of which I have certainly, been a victim of. And so it's important that as these advances are being made, that everyone, especially historically marginalized communities, have access from development to the implementation of new technologies and career opportunities in these fields.
Today, we have an incredible lineup of speakers who will share their insights and expertise on the topics and how students can begin to explore opportunities in this field. We're honored to be joined by our today panelists. This question is for Elbert Hardeman. As a BDL board member and being able to see debate on the ground quite frequently, what are the most key skills debaters develop that you can find transferable to a career in technology?
That's an excellent question, and thank you for the question. And just thank you for having me on the panel. It's such an honor to be in front of this group and the students listening. I think to answer your question, I answered it in two ways. One skill that I think debaters have and gain throughout their experience as a debater is analytical skills, right? Being able to analyze a problem or a situation or an argument. I can't stress enough how important that is in any science or computer technology. It's an extremely important skill to understand and break down whether that's computer programming or just understanding a concept within technology. So analytical skills, I think, is the first one. The second item I would mention is the ability to see multiple sides of an argument. Many times in my job, I have to, it's not just, should we implement a technology, it's why should we implement it and what's the alternative, right? And so the ability to analyze a problem, the ability to argue the other side are two critical skills in technology that I think debaters are uniquely positioned and trained at as they develop in their debate career.
Thank you, Elbert. And this question is for Cameron. What resources are there available for women of color in the tech industry? And what has been the most helpful resource for you as you've grown your career at Amazon?
All very good questions. I think as a woman, you will go through multiple cycles of development. And truly, this is true as any human being. But what you could particularly do to really help yourself find these resources is look out for women-specific groups. So if you're in the high school area, I greatly, highly recommend the National Center of Women in Information Technology. It was the first women's group I ever joined, and it really changed my life. It was a group of other students who were roughly around my same age group, who were interested in pursuing a bevy of different technical careers. But what was most unique was there was a centralized place for us to find resources. You want to go to this conference, just post something on the chat and someone will help you. As I progressed out of high school, moving into college, again, I joined, a women's computer science group in which we met once a week. So finding spaces where other people can identify with the situations that you'll be in, I think is absolutely paramount, especially for a woman of color, because you'll be able to have a conversation with them that doesn't require context, which will be required in some other spaces that you live and work. The most helpful resource that I have gotten or grown in my career is the ability to ask questions and ask them as much as you can. When you are young and youthful, people will tell you everything. When you get past a certain age, then they're like, I don't know, should I spend the time? So be thoughtful and willing to pose a question to the people around you. Ask how they do what they do. Ask why they've done what they are doing. And ask what would happen if you tried to do those things. I think that level of curiosity has really shaped my career at Amazon, largely because it's opened doors as a woman of color that I didn't know were possible. I happen to be the only woman in all of Amazon to have been sent on a foreign technical assignment. And I only got that opportunity because I asked, well, what's the craziest thing that this company offers internally that an engineer can pick up and do? And as a result of that, I got sent to Germany, which was totally one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. So being willing to be curious and asking others around you.
Thank you, Cameron.
Oh, that answer was really amazing. And I do agree with the part of asking questions. I do love asking questions and I love talking in general. But this next question is for Luis. So actually, Luis, is your career at Moderna what you imagined? Is there anything you would do differently to prepare yourself for the role of, or for finding your path in biotech and pharmaceuticals?
I guess, thank you for that question. I've actually been thinking about this a lot recently because I'm at a point in my career where I have multiple like, I guess, different experiences in biotech, whether it was like my first job was a startup, my second job was a multi-million-dollar company that's a lot bigger than Moderna, and now I'm at Moderna, which is like a mid-level company, which is what I would consider that. But I was imagining Moderna like very different. Like I've had a really great experience here. I love it here. I love it at Moderna. I've never felt more welcomed to a company than I have at Moderna. And I think that has to do with like the level of diversity and how much focus they have to that, that allows people to grow within like their fields or however, whatever they want to pick. Like, for example, me, I came in as like a chemist, like I want to be in the lab, I want to do this, and then there like different things piqued my interest, and now I'm more like outside of the lab, more like project management side of things, but still very much involved with the analytical development of what people do in their specific roles in the lab. So I'm kind of like outside of the lab, but still very much involved, and that's kind of like how I wanted to develop. So I do think that Moderna has allowed me to grow in a way that I didn't know was possible for me, because I saw myself just being in the lab forever until, like, I don't know, I became a scientist or something like that. So I do like that I was given the opportunity to grow. As far as preparing myself for this role, I was in a unique situation because I paid for school myself. So like I was working 40 hours a week while in school. So like I didn't really necessarily have a lot of time to put in to prepare myself for the outside, like outside of school world where it's like working and stuff. So I do think anytime people ask me this question, I do tell students, like, if you do have the opportunity and the ability to do so, getting internships and co-ops is definitely like, it's put you leaps forward where I'm at. So highly recommended for you to do that.
Thank you, Luis. I appreciate that perspective. And I'd love to dive into some questions that any of the panelists can jump in and answer, and we'd love to hear from all of you. And specifically, you want to start with how we can address the lack of diversity and representation in the tech industry and ensure that all voices are heard in the development and implementation of these new technologies.
Also, we want to address how can someone interested in using biotechnology, artificial intelligence, or cybersecurity to advance equity and social justice incorporate those values into their career path?
Don't all jump at once.
I'll be the brave person. No one likes to go first. I'll go first, so then someone else can say something even more marvelous after me. I think when we consider diversity and representation, right, the first thing that someone is going to say is like, there's a pipeline problem and there's not like a sufficient amount of us who are interested in these spaces. And I might say that maybe that is true, but even when we get in these spaces, there can be challenges there. So instead, I think there are two folds that we as everyday people can think of more adeptly in order to address this problem. There's us as the consumer and there's us as the developer. For people who are developing technologies in these areas, I would say the most important question to ask yourself is, what happens if, what does the world look like when I achieve my goal, and who gets hurt? That latter part of the question is important because it will expose where there are areas in your plan or in your vision that can be more inclusive, that can support your community or support communities around you. And I think at every stage, whether you're doing a really big project that's going to be launched globally, or you're just doing something small internally, just having that foresight to think about what could go wrong is absolutely critical. And then I was saying in the beginning, there's also this idea of you as a consumer. So as a consumer, I'm thinking more in the like cybersecurity AI area, right? Like we're very quick to download applications from places we don't know, to do something totally arbitrary, or we want to use a filter even though that filter is sending pictures of our faces different places. So I think being educated about, okay, I'm going to pick up this piece of technology and I'm going to use this piece of technology. What does it mean and what implications does it end up having on a diverse community? Because that's also a way in which you can show, power to say, hey, I don't like that I'm, basically providing data to train an algorithm to do something that I'm not in support of, right? It may mean you miss out on some videos like, TikTok, but, sometimes that can be worth it.
I guess I'll chime in. I think the lack of diversity and representation comes from maybe people not understanding that we can all do the same thing that other communities can do. And so maybe it stems from like your culture or where you're from. Like I'm from Arizona. Like I never really considered myself moving to Boston and moving across the country to pursue like my goals and my dreams and like what I wanted to do as far as pharmaceutical company. All I knew was Boston was where the biotechs were, and I'm just like, let's do it. Let's move. And I think that like to address it, you should really focus on how you want to be perceived, right? So like if you're putting yourself in a company that doesn't necessarily, I guess, want diversity or like look for diversity, right? Like you want to put yourself in situations where you're like, okay, my company supports me and then supports my choices as like part of the diversity or the culture in the company. And then moreover, like where it says like how we can start like making sure that the communities are impacted with biotech. For example, Moderna, when we do our clinical studies, we specifically target a diverse, I guess, group of people, right? Because the vaccines react differently to many people, and so like we want to make sure that that's put out there, right? That we make sure that our clinical studies include everyone that could potentially receive our vaccines. And so that's important to me, being in a company that knows the importance of having a diverse group of people being included in different tests. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Elbert, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, particularly because I think cybersecurity is an area that's growing so much. But again, it's one of the areas in tech where there just aren't as many people of color going into that industry. And I think, when we think about it, as I mentioned earlier, I've had breaches, in my own life, and it definitely impacts businesses and individuals, but how can, we make sure that there's diversity and representation in that field?
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think we all have to realize that, every one of us is a technologist. I mean, just by logging on to this Zoom call today, you've interacted with technology. When you make a payment at a grocery store or go to an ATM, you're interacting with technology. And so many people try to bucket cybersecurity professionals as people behind a screen in a locked room looking at threats on a screen. And cybersecurity has so many different layers to it, right? And so I think we have to broaden our understanding of what it means to be in technology and what it means to be in, umbrella of cyber technology like cybersecurity. So one can be an English major, right? You enjoy reading and writing, and you want to understand policy or data privacy, right? I have a lot of folks on my staff that don't have a technology background, right? They don't have an undergraduate in computer science, computer engineering. They come from different fields. but are succeeding within the technology realm, right? And so you don't have to know how to code. You don't have to be into computer engineering to be in cybersecurity, right? You simply have to have a will and an interest in that, and you'll be able to find your way. And that could be in auditing the system, that could be in documenting policy, that can be in security architecture, or in programming, right? And so there are different entry points in getting into cybersecurity.
Thank you. And I know that you each spoke somewhat to this. We had a question come in, and so I'll actually throw this in here because, you know, Lewis, in particular, you mentioned not having the opportunity sort of to network. So can you each speak to the role of networking in advancing your career, and how might students even in high school start to make connections to industry professionals?
I think I think I don't know. I'd like to see if I can answer this because Cameron mentioned something about being very much involved in like a specific group in high school, and so was I. I was president of National Honor Society, so like I was very much involved with like my teachers and companies outside of school to like bring them in, like blood drives and stuff like that, and trying to network myself as far as like, oh look, like I can manage a group of people to like execute a certain event, right? And I've always really liked that in doing that. And I think even in high school, I'm pretty sure you can make like a LinkedIn account and like connect with other students, other people that are interested in the same fields, like as you're getting closer to graduating, right? I think that's appropriate to do, as because you're starting to develop maybe a sense of like what your resume should look like in a virtual sense of like, hey, I did this in high school, and you start developing that as you do more things in college, and then you do more things outside of college when you get your first job, and you start kind of like seeing the differences of like what your profile technically looked like when you started and then how it looks like now. Like I see that with me even from the last 5 years that I graduated college, right? Like I see how like I barely had any experience, and now I have like a pretty sweet resume, I could say, like where like I get people reaching out to me like, hey, how can I get a job in this other company that I'm not even part of anymore? Like, right? Like just that they're just like interested in, okay, this person worked there, left, but somehow can still guide me or to like potentially getting in anywhere, right? So I think networking is really important right now. I mean, I talk to whoever at work. I try to even network within work, right? Because like the network that you build within your company can help you succeed and grow your career substantially, I think. So it's always good to just continually learning from other people, and that even that's part of networking, right? Just learning.
Yeah, I agree. I think networking is important in having relationships. I mean, coming to this webinar is probably the first step. I think you'd be surprised just by reaching out to individuals. And if you're on a podcast, or if you read an article about something, you know, I remember in high school, I just, you know, I read an article about computer programming and just emailed the author. It was like, hey, I'm interested in this field. I'm thinking about studying computer engineering. And the person got back to me, right? I think you'd be surprised how much people are interested to talk about their own work. And when people reach out to them, they really want to, you know, give back to the community. So that's extremely important. And Cameron mentioned this. I think, you know, National Association of Black Engineers, when I was in high school, I joined and joined throughout college. Is a great way to network. And to this day, I have good friends from that program that I met at different conferences that I still reach out to today and say, hey, I'm dealing with this problem in data privacy. What is your organization doing around risk tolerance, for example, right? And you're able to bounce ideas off of other people that you've connected with throughout your high school and college career. Becomes very important to form that sense of community. And then as you get into the professional world, you know, there's trainings and conferences, et cetera, that also kind of further develop that ability to network and connect with others in your profession.
Yeah, really interesting. We're having a lot of talking about jobs and stuff like that. So I want to ask you guys something more of related to this topic. There's a lot of conversation happening right now about the jobs and that they will disappear with the integration of artificial intelligence, impacting jobs in every industry. How can students get ahead of this now, or do you think that's actually going to happen?
Okay, so I think it's integration of AI, right? Not exclusively AI. At least that's how I see it, right? Like
Yeah,
for
definitely.
example,
You're right.
we've recently been able, like I'm able to use ChatGPT within my work scope, right? To like ask questions of like anything that I would want to like help with my job, but I don't necessarily think it's ever going to replace me, right? Like it's hard for, like I think maybe in the future it might, like, right, it's like learning what we do and how we do things, and that's like the whole, maybe the point of it, right, is to replace me. But in the end, I do think that we're needed for it to learn, right? Like it's not all knowing, and it'll never be all knowing, and neither will we. But I think it's if we continue to use it and learn, we can use it to our advantage, right? To be able to code better, to be able to code clearer, to be able to maybe phrase a sentence better, or to be able to, like, I don't know, maybe automate something that's taking you 40 hours when you can be putting your attention somewhere else, right? So like I think it's going to be a very essential tool. I think the more people go into like computer science and more programming sort of majors, I think it's just, that's probably where the world will go, right? Like if someone asks me, like if my nephew asked me where he should go to college, I would probably say like, oh, do like something science related, something computer science, something programming related, right? For that reason, because I'm seeing it now that there's a lot of automation going on and stuff like that. So like, I don't know. That's my take, at least.
Albert, Cameron, are you in agreement? Love to hear your take.
Kinda, mostly 80%, which is pretty good. I would say, as someone who works in robotics, I think it's very, very common that the first response is, like, hey, look, I've got this new robot, and someone freaks out and they're like, cool, that's all my jobs. And then you're like, let me show you how I tested the software that the robot is running, right? And the robot like does something completely different from what you planned, and you're like, this is time 3000. I think there's a recency bias here that's happening, where everyone sees Chat GTP and they think it just came out of nowhere. It's just totally changing the landscape. But the truth is, these are areas of science that people have been studying since like the 60s and the 70s, and it's a natural progression. That's a good thing. I think there are areas that, yes, could be automated, but automation is not to be feared, right? We go to the grocery store every day or every couple of days and buy our groceries, and that frees us up from needing to farm, right? Like we don't need to do that. We can have people who are specialized in that area produce enough food for our entire country. I kind of see these new resources in the same area as like they are freeing you up to focus on the next harder part of the problem, right? And because there are many parts of the problem, especially in areas of AI, that are really, quite frankly, unsolved, but also unrecognized. Like we don't know what will come next that needs to be focused on. My team largely focuses on making sure you can control robots all over the globe from one place. And it seems like a pretty simple problem, and it conceptually is very easy to say, and yet there's all these really small pieces we're running around trying to solve, because for something that seems so mundane, there's a lot to do. And so it helps when we can automate even the smallest of chunks.
I think just to echo her real quick, because she mentioned something that was like pretty valuable, where she's saying that it frees us up to do something else, right? Like, and she mentioned going into a grocery store. Like, just remember, like 10 years ago, you walked into the grocery store, there was cashiers actually being cashiers, right? And now it's like everything is automated. There's some stores where you can just like walk out and then it pays for itself, like, right? So that in itself, you don't necessarily see a loss of jobs, right? You more saw like a relocation of resources, right? So like now maybe the shelves are stocked quicker. There's more cleanliness in the store. Or whatever there is. There's different designs going on in the store. It looks better. It flows better because now they have time to focus on maybe the little minute details that they didn't have time to focus on before because it was someone standing at a cashier for 8 hours a day, right?
Yeah, I tend to agree. And maybe I take a more gloomy picture of it. I think there will be some loss of certain types of jobs, right? There'll be certain jobs that no longer require a person to do because a robot or that's AI driven can do it better. In order to prepare for that, like any technology, we have to understand it and embrace it, right? And so we have to understand how to use it for our own advantage in our own career, to not be afraid of it, to kind of lean into the new technology and learn about it. And then it's always, right, beneficial to be on the front end of technology and learn how to create it, right? Learn how to develop it, manage it, and lean into kind of where I think the future is heading. And so if we use it as a tool, like we use, I don't mean to oversimplify, spell check. We have to kind of say, this is just going to be part of how we use technology and how we engage in our work every day. AI is going to be part of that. And if we can stay on top of it and learn how to use it for our own benefit, I think things will align for us all.
I appreciate that last point, Elbert, and I wonder if you all have any other ways that students can leverage sort of where we are right now in technology to either stay ahead, right, or remain current as they're thinking about potential opportunities in these fields.
Yeah, I think we're in a very unique space in our time, and I say that because a lot of the information is available to us all. We all have access to webinars. We have access to AWS training. We have access to ISACA courses, SANS courses, all these different technology groups and organizations that exist online are available to us. I mean, you can literally go on YouTube and type in anything and get trained up on it. And I'll say that I think it's as equal or valuable training to a formal education sometimes, depending on the area that you want to study, right? And kind of how you want to enter that field. And so staying current with podcasts that are specific to the area that you're interested in, staying current to professional organizations like SANS or National Association of Black Engineers, organizations that are in the field that you're interested in, and just making sure that you're staying current to the hot topic. In cybersecurity, Verizon produces a data breach report every year, right? And so if you're interested in that field, you ought to just read that, right? It's like, it's a 30-page summary every year that talks about the most current data breaches. And so being current is important. And it's also important for that job interview, right? Because it's not going to just be the skill sets and your experience, but are you up to date and current? And can you talk about what's happening in the world and how that impacts the organization that you want to be a part of?
I might do a little bit of advertising here. Working at Amazon happens to be the one of the largest companies that are available here in the world. And what I can say specifically is within AWS, we offer well over 200 services, right? And 200 services may not, blow your mind, but it's essentially like having 200 companies underneath this one umbrella, which is underneath another very large umbrella of our parent company. And what AWS focuses on heavily is investing in the community, and the ways in which we do that are multifaceted. Like, you can come see what's happening in an FC, like we will explain the process to you. You can take an AWS certification, you can join an AWS class, you can watch reInvent online, which is where they bring the smartest people of the world to talk about what the problems are currently happening. So if you, as previously mentioned, right, there's so much data out there, right? And it can be hard to filter to say, oh, this is the sort of information I want to need, like I'm interested in learning about, right? Because we do not have enough time to truly read everything that's available on the internet. I think if you wanted to take a sort of hacky way, and I don't know, hacky is PR approved, so sorry. But I think if you wanted to sort of hack your way into it, I recommend following one of these really large groups like an AWS, because they have to move at a speed fast enough to meet the needs of their customer, not just now, but I mean like 5-10 years down the line. So they are thinking long-term about that other area. But I'd also then pivot and say, when you see these opportunities, you might go and say, oh, I'm a roboticist, I only care about robots, I'm gonna like focus on the robot track. And I highly encourage you not to do this. The greatest areas of achievement happen at the intersection of different things, right? It's when you can finally realize that two different areas like writing and computer science are interconnected, where you get something like totally novel and amazing. So join a talk where you're like, I don't know anything about this. I don't know why these people are here, and I don't know what I'm going to do with this information. Join those talks. You'd be really surprised how quickly you can start applying some of that knowledge, and how that gives you a competitive edge because you came in with some perspective that someone else didn't have in the group.
Thanks, Cameron. And before hold your comment, just I wanted to have Cameron, if you could just sort of define AWS for those who may not know the acronym.
Very fair, very fair. AWS stands for Amazon Web Services. It is the part of Amazon that is responsible for building infrastructure as code, and we continue to expand in new areas. But if you've ever used something like Netflix to watch television at night, then you have indirectly used our product because their products are built on.
Thank you.
Just real quick, because I think the theme here is like education, and my AC just turned on, so it sounds horrible in here probably. But yeah, like I never realized how much education doesn't stop, right? Like I graduated 5 years ago, and I'm still continually educating myself in whether it's the products that my company sells or will sell or whatever, or just developing my own self professionally, right? Like whether getting some certification, like a green belt, yellow belt, like different certifications for engineers, different certifications for project management stuff. And I think that in itself, like how she was saying, like I'm a biochemist at heart, but at the same time, like I'm learning all these different certifications, and I'm like, okay, no, I'm really interested in this, but I'm applying my analytical brain to it, sort of, and it's helping kind of like glue all the pieces together as to like what I want my future self to look like, right?
Appreciate that. Thank you. And I know, Alde, it looks like you have one more question before we jump to some of our audience questions. You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. What skills and knowledge do you think are the most important for someone interested in a career in biotechnology, artificial intelligence, or cybersecurity, and how can we acquire them?
So I think it's, I don't know if it's a skill or a knowledge. Curiosity. You have to be curious. The ability to, someone had mentioned this, asking questions. And I said this earlier, I think it's also just being, analytical, having analytical skills, the ability to analyze, problems and solve problems and enjoy solving problems. I think those are the three most important things. How to decipher information and move through a lot of information and really understand how it applies to what you're doing today, right? So having that ability to go through a lot of information and understand the impact it may have on your role is extremely important.
I think I would like to add to what Elbert was saying is like definitely be curious, but also be bold in your choices, right? So like just make sure that like if you want to do something, like just set your mind to it, like research how you can come into biotech, right? Like what certifications do you need? What education do you need? What volunteering should you be doing to be able to like have access to different paths into biotech? Like I do think like when I first took this job, like right, someone told me it was like just be bold and say yes to it, and then you'll see if you like it or not. You can always come back. You can always do something else, right? You can always move or whatever. And I think it's just like that's something that maybe it's not a lot of people know that they can do. Is just do it. Nike.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of those. Within Amazon, we have what are called leadership principles. And I will say this is like the first place I've ever worked where it wasn't like our values were printed on the back of your badge and like you never read them. But two of the ones that I think really stand out as skills that set people apart when I think of either people I want to join my engineering team or people I want to work with me in our affinity group, Ben. The first one is like the principle is to be customer obsessed. So I'm looking for someone to demonstrate the skill that when they propose something new, they've thought about how it's going to impact our primary customer, the person we're trying to help. How does it help them? How can you measure that it helped them? Why are we doing this? And I think that matters a lot from both in engineering and every other area, right? Is to making sure that what you're doing has value and that you're actually trying to hit the target that you think you're hitting. So I typically look for that. And then the second skill that I'm really looking for is what's called deals with ambiguity. So you're put in a situation where most of the variables you do not have. You do not know how to solve this problem, whether that be a technical problem or a social problem, but you do not freak out. Instead, you do what is most logical and you start applying somewhat like the scientific method about like, if I research this area, I may find this person and I can ask them this question and they may lead me down this rabbit hole. And before you know it, like you keep solving these iterative chunks of the problem, working backwards. And then essentially you have arrived at a solution which would not have been possible if you just kind of sort of sat in a room and freaked out and were like, I couldn't solve this. So I think those are my two biggest areas. So if you have those skills and you decide to join like the Amazon internship, I'd love to see you because you're going to be a rock star and I'd be really excited to have you.
Thank you for responding. That
you.
was a really, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for responding. Those were really, really interesting questions, or I'm sorry, really interesting answers. I do agree with all of you. They are really, I love your perspectives. Thank you for answering my question.
Now we have a few questions that we've collected from the audience, and you know, this sort of goes back to something that you mentioned, Elbert. You mentioned that you had, you know, folks who are maybe English majors or something, right? That's very different from cybersecurity that work with you. And so we had one question come in around, you know, just besides sort of the typical jobs that you hear about. So if you think about Moderna, you think scientists, you know, cybersecurity, you think someone who, you know, probably a computer science major. You know, what are the other types of jobs that exist in, you know, AI, biotech, and cybersecurity? And, you know, how do people find those jobs?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll answer the second one. I think it's about just talking to people within the field. to get a better understanding of exactly, the areas that impact them. But when you think about a field like cybersecurity, like I said, you can be an intelligence officer where you're analyzing threats from across different nations. You can write policy, right? So literally coming up with a policy in which companies want to implement to secure their systems. You can be a product owner, right? And so there are cybersecurity products. And as a product owner, you're helping to lead the team and build that product and add features to that product. A product owner does not have to have a background in technology or be a developer, but certainly should be interested in technology, right? You could also be a project manager where you're managing a project from beginning to end. You could also be what's called UX and UI, right? And so if you user experience and user interfaces, and so if you just like designing websites and designing features, right? You don't have to be a programmer to do that. You can help support developers to better understand how to interact with the customer and what the customer needs and where to click and where to drop down, right? And so anywhere from an English major to a designer, to a scientist, to a computer engineer, all of those are viable, education paths into technology and into cybersecurity.
I think he answered just like literally anything that you can think of. Like just because you think of like a pharmaceutical company only requiring scientists, right? That's typically that's what I thought, to be honest, when I first started, is just like, oh, scientists, like you have to be a chemistry major. No, like my manager, I think, has like a zoology degree. Like she just has the experience to like be a manager. She has the experience to like be able to coordinate all of us, like multiple people at once, and give us our direction as to like what we need, right? But she's also a really good technical writer, right? So she's able to like tell us how we're supposed to write to be able to like give this information to outside sources, right? So I think just like how he said, from an English major to a scientist to a programmer to an engineer, like there's mechanical engineers, there's software engineers, there's all sorts of engineers at Moderna, and you just would never really think about it, right? Because engineers are the ones that are controlling our process and kind of developing our process to make it better and more automated and easier to like maneuver, I guess. And so like that's why you need those types of people, right? But you don't need scientists to be more analytical to develop drugs or to develop different therapeutics and stuff like that. So
Agree. Hard agree. 1,000% agree. Totally rare. But want to find a job that you've never heard of? Find a company that you're interested in, then go to their jobs page. Today, working here, which I have been here for almost 4 years, I discovered we have a head of hip hop music. I've never heard of said position. I've been here for a long time, didn't know that was a thing. But I'm sure if I had just like spent some time like looking through some of the jobs that are offered, I learned that it's a sort of cross between A&R and sort of, artist relations and research. And I didn't know that that was an intersection. So I think this has been echoed a lot, right? Like talking to people, yes, but also just like looking to see what sort of public information people are fleshing out, because the coolest part of being in our generation is like there are more jobs that will be created in areas we have yet to discover. So by the time we're done with this talk, someone else in the world has probably come up with some obscure job title that we've never heard of that could be really awesome and totally up your alley. And I think one of the fastest way to find it would just be look at what jobs they're posting, look at what they require, and don't even hold yourself to that, because there's always that slip at the bottom that's like, don't think you match, you might match, so.
Yeah, and I think, Alda, did you have one more question that you wanted to ask before we close out?
Okay, so this is a highly speculative question. This is more related to the artificial intelligence type of field. Is what do you think is the next logical step for artificial intelligence, or like the next step that's going to happen? I've been thinking on, because I've been taking some courses about artificial intelligence. A lot of people are really hyped about the fact of like, I personally don't believe this is going to happen anytime soon, or even it's going to happen at any time. But they believe that AI can be used to filter quote unquote fake news. In my personal opinion, that's not going to happen. But, like, what are your opinions, like you people who are actually expertises on this topic?
I'm just gonna say that I don't necessarily am not too like experienced with AI in that sense, right? With the new, like for example, ChatGPT or like the potentials of it, but I do think, I mean, that it's possible. I mean, it is. It could be possible, right? But like that it would happen. I find it pretty improbable, right? Because I think like a lot of that then just gets more into different issues, right? So like whether it's hindering like freedom of speech and stuff like that, like as far as like what you're introduced into and like what you're exposed to. Like I don't necessarily think that AI will essentially like waste their time in filtering that out when it could do so much better for other things, right? Like developing, I don't know, helping develop a cure for something, right? Or helping make Amazon even faster than it already is. I got a package that I ordered this morning, so I mean, like I don't know how I can get faster other than teleporting it to me, but like I think overall we just need to believe that AI is like for the good and for the better of just like how we live, as opposed to like could it damage us? Yeah, it could, but will it? Probably not.
I don't have personal, work experience in AI, but I think one area that, I've been fascinated with in artificial intelligence is its impact on medical research and the ability to, if you're in a remote village, in India, and a patient has certain symptoms, the ability to use AI to type in those symptoms and get all the inputs from others that have interacted with that interface and get a treatment plan going, I think is also very impactful. And so, I like to think that technology is just a tool, and we could use it for good or for bad. And it's not all bad. It can be used for positive. And so I think I'm more interested in how AI can help us just be more collaborative and solve problems a lot faster than we can do now on our own or within our smaller networks, right? It has an ability to reach out to other networks that have inputs into whatever interface that we're engaging in and help us solve problems even faster.
So there are so many futures, and I wanted to go at the end because I didn't want to be the nerdy person who went on. I think so. I am on a robotics team. I have worked in robotics the entire time. I've worked for Amazon, whether that be in the robotics division, Amazon Robotics, or in AWS. Love robots. Actually, my degree is in computer science or computer vision specifically. So in terms of where AI is going to go next, I think there's a lot of different areas. I hope that we're really concerned or interested in solving problems in the visual technology space. I think there are a lot of really awesome applications or research areas, particularly the two that like could cause me to talk about it for hours, but I will not do that to you this evening, are in the space of how we can apply computer visions to create movies or to help us with visual effects automatically in movies. And for the first time, people like AWS are helping us reach computational power that we've never had before, where we can do all this stuff on the cloud and we can do it remotely. I think that will be a huge game changer in terms of like when you watch the news, when you watch football, when you go to the theater, having these sort of automated effects are really going to change the way you view things. And then the other area that I'm very, 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 very hopeful will become big is abstracting sound from visual images without having an audio track. There's a professor in Boston who kind of specializes in this area / helped create it. And what he is, the project that he is most famous for is singing a song to a bag of potato chips, and then there's no audio being recorded, and they are able to reconstruct the audio just using the sound waves based on the vibration of how things moved in the images, which is like absolutely mind-blowing. And it could be incredibly helpful for people who might have sort of hearing disabilities, and we're concerned about, you know, making sure they can actually hear programming. Or if you want to think of it from a historical point of view, there's a lot of soundless clips that we have. What if you could hear what it sounded like in like 1905 or something in this obscure area? Like, that would make me so excited.
Wow, that's really very interesting. Thank you, Cameron, Luis, and Elbert, for your time tonight, and thank you for just these gems. I think, you know, that we can all do what other communities do. I appreciate that, and you know, thinking about how communities of color can benefit and can take advantage of the technological advances that are happening, asking questions, staying curious, and I think most importantly that, you know, you don't necessarily need a background in tech to get into these industries and to make an impact and to bring, you know, your sort of your passions and your interests to the field. So I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank my co-moderator, Alde. That was a wonderful sort of closing question there to really get us thinking. And we do have a little survey that we would love if you could give us feedback on what you thought. But I really thought that this was a powerful conversation. So thank you again to our panelists for sharing your expertise and your insights. And if you'd like to learn more about the Boston Debate League, please visit us at bostondebate.org. Our tournament season is over, but we would love to have you. You sign up to be a volunteer next season. Sign up for our newsletter to learn more about what is happening. And thank you all for joining us tonight. Good evening. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.